I have transformed into an arrogant and domineering princess. The prince consort harbors disdain for me, and I reciprocate with my own aversion. He cannot tolerate my penchant for keeping handsome young men, while I find him to be nothing more than a rough and uncouth man. Subsequently, the entire family of the prince consort was sentenced to exile, and rather than extending a helping hand, I took pleasure in adding to his misfortunes. Before the sympathetic gazes of the townsfolk, I pelted him with a basket of rotten eggs, leaving him utterly chilled. The affection bestowed upon me by my father and mother serves as my capital for indulgence. Yet, all such affection is predicated upon value. My father exploited me to eliminate the entire clan of the prince consort, whose achievements overshadowed his lord. My mother drugged me and offered me as a plaything to the Turks in exchange for military support. In the end, I became the discarded pawn cast down from the city walls by my elder brother, while the prince consort chose to observe with indifference. My life has been a series of careless encounters, and not a single soul has truly loved me. 1. As I stepped into the narrative, there remained but an hour before my husband's estate would face confiscation. A throng of youthful eunuchs, their faces painted in delicate hues, surrounded me, chattering incessantly, yet my mind was consumed with thoughts of my dismal fate. Within the pages of the book, I was betrothed to the youngest son of the Duke of England, Li Changza. After our marriage, he despised my penchant for indulging in frivolous affairs, while I found him to be nothing more than a coarse brute. We were both young, and had it not been for his cruelty towards my fragile lover, we could have easily lived our lives apart. Yet, he chose to torment my delicate companion. When the Duke's household was exiled, in a bid for revenge, I publicly humiliated the prince consort. On that fateful day, armed with a basket of foul-smelling eggs, I eagerly awaited his passage, determined to send him off with a memorable farewell. The Duke's family, renowned for their loyalty, had now fallen from grace. Yet their reputation remained unshaken in the eyes of the public. As the common folk passed by, not a single one intervened, while I relentlessly pursued Li Changza with my wrath. The first rotten egg struck him, and he merely turned his head to glance at me before closing his eyes. Gripping the iron chains on his wrists tightly, the viscous, murky yolk cascaded down, mingling with suspicious clumps, leaving behind a slick trail as it dripped through his hair. Each droplet resembled a slug's slimy trail. He showed no inclination to retaliate, igniting my desire to provoke him further. With 2, then 3.5 baskets thrown, he astonishingly remained stoic. My fury ignited. Did he not comprehend the effort it took to amass such a collection of foul eggs? His indifference was a complete affront to me. I circled to face him directly and hurled a rotten egg squarely at his countenance. Li Changza, are you not arrogant? Go ahead, show me your bravado again. Let me see you bully my dear little turtle slave once more. Go. Complain to the emperor, and let me bear the brunt of his reprimand. Look down upon me, will you? Now, you are beneath even a mere eunuch. You pride yourself on your superiority. Open your eyes and behold, it is I who now gazes down upon you. With each word, I hurled an egg with all my might, causing his facial muscles to quiver with each impact. The yellowish-green liquid splattered like grotesque, poisonous mushrooms blooming in the air, illuminating the dark depths of my heart. I reveled in my catharsis. Throughout this ordeal, Li Changza remained silent. Only his mother, filled with anguish, pleaded for mercy, silenced by the stern reprimands of his father. Li Changza's tattered garments soon became drenched in the stench of rotting eggs. The north wind howled, winter's chill still biting, as the last flurries of snow descended from the heavens, solidifying the noxious liquid upon him, an indelible mark of this moment. I was liberated once more. Upon returning to the palace, I replaced all the eunuchs with real men, indulging in a veritable harem of 18. Life was blissfully enjoyable. Little did I know, fate would bring me face to face with Li Changza again. This time, the tides had turned. I became the discarded refuse, while Li Changza emerged as a rebel, forcing my imperial brother into an inescapable corner on the brink of ascendance. My brother, filled with animosity towards Li Changza's insurrection, sought to ally with the Turks. To demonstrate his sincerity, he set his sights on me, or perhaps he aimed to transfer his animosity towards Li Changza onto me, the former wife of the Li family. Naturally, I refused. It was my mother, who personally rendered me unconscious and sent me off in a bridal palanquin to marry the aging Turkic Khan, older than my own father. The old Khan bestowed upon me none of the dignity befitting a princess, instead handing me over to his followers. A dignified princess, subjected to humiliation in a foreign land. In the midst of heavy snowfall, I was passed around like an object among the brutish Turks. I lost count of how many times I bore children, only to see them all perish. The dual torment of body and mind did not extinguish my will to survive. For I harbored a deep-seated hatred for my mother's cruelty, and hatred for Li Chang's rebellion that had brought me such suffering. I endured, waiting for the day I could exact revenge upon my foes. After an indeterminate period, my brother finally came to rescue me. In moments of desperation, one can entertain delusions. I, for instance, believed my brother had finally discovered his conscience and would lead me from this abyss of misery. Yet, I was gravely mistaken. He sought to use me as leverage. My brother, a figure of mockery, threatened Li Chang's with my life as a bargaining tool. However, Li Chang's loathed the Murong royal family with a venomous intensity, especially in light of my previous public humiliation of him. It was as if he were an audience member, awaiting the spectacle of my brother's rage. His indifferent dismissal of my life sealed my fate. He watched as my brother, in a fit of fury, cast me over the city walls. Countless soldiers trampled over me. When the battle concluded, my body lay in a grotesque state, bloodied and mangled. 2. Upon clarifying the situation, I found myself ensnared in a predicament, surrounded by adversaries. Lacking any extraordinary abilities or understanding of the intricacies of power, I was merely an inconspicuous novice, thrust into an unwelcome role. In an instant, I found myself devoid of allies or trustworthy companions. To Li Chang's, I was but a victim of my own folly. Yet, to my father and mother, I was a pitiful creature. Born into privilege, I was destined to meet an ignoble end. I was nothing more than a puppet, manipulated throughout my life, used by my father, abandoned by my mother, and ultimately betrayed by my brother. In times of tranquility, I was a mere embellishment. When calamity loomed, I became their shield. They bestowed upon me affection and honor, only to also grant me indifference and cruelty, molding me into a distorted persona. In my youth, my mother focused all her attention on my brother, compelling me to seek her approval through any means necessary. After repeated failures, I succumbed to my own excesses, becoming brash and unruly. By the age of 12, I began collecting male companions, whimsically dubbed turtle slaves. Everyone indulged my whims. My father held court every 3 years. Yet I, the princess, was selected annually. Each new batch of eunuchs arriving at court quickly lost their novelty, fading faster than my notorious reputation. Including Li Chang's. I could not abide his haughty demeanor, as if he were somehow more esteemed than I, the princess. I dreamt of bending his spine and forcing him to grovel at my feet. Ultimately, however, I found myself prostrate before him. He resented my public humiliation of him, yet it paled in comparison to the contempt of my father and brother. In the 15th year of Jingyuan, the Duke of England returned home in triumph. My father hosted a grand celebration in their honor, during which I was betrothed to the celebrated Li Chang's. This was not a reward, but rather an affront, a pretext for my father to ensnare the Li family in a web of deceit and malice, displeased by the notion of marrying me, a princess of ill repute. With peace prevailing in the daxia, the Duke's household had lost its significance. Merely half a year into our marriage, my father hastily concocted a flimsy case against the Li family, devoid of any semblance of justice. The Duke's 4 sons perished valiantly in battle, only for their noble bones to be buried in the yellow sands, culminating in the emperor's suspicion of his loyal subjects. Following their exile, the Li family faced a string of tragedies, igniting Li Chang's ambition. He rebelled, and with success, for he was the protagonist of the tale, a victim of the Murong clan's treachery, who ultimately brought about their downfall. I knew not whether the fate of a male protagonist could be altered, yet I was acutely aware that I lacked the grand vision required to be an empress. Perhaps he was the most advantageous choice in my calculations. At the very least, within the narrative, it was he who, after the battle's conclusion, gathered the scattered remains of the fallen, interring them in the desolate sands. His character bore the marks of kindness. Thus, to survive, I had no choice but to expedite the progress of the prince consort's rebellion. I could take solace in the fact that, at this juncture, Li Changze merely viewed me with disdain, rather than hatred. Aside from that basket of rotten eggs, we were nearly evenly matched. He would resist any attempt to undermine him, never conceding even the smallest advantage to me. Without discerning right from wrong, I sought to demand justice for the small tortoise slave who had been wronged. Li Changze promptly bound that unfortunate soul and, before my very eyes, beat him nearly to death. My teeth ground in fury, yet I found myself powerless to intervene. He possessed a greater understanding of self-preservation than many a feckless female protagonist. Rather than safeguarding the dignity of the Morong imperial family, I would prefer to scrape by under Li Changze's auspices. Even if I lacked knowledge of political machinations, I could still offer a glimpse of what was to come. However, at present, the most pressing matter was to uncover the so-called evidence of wrongdoing. I vaguely recalled something about a dragon robe. Time was of the essence, and I dashed towards the Duke of England's study. In the study, Duke Li Zhuang, his heir Li Changyan, and Li Changze were all present. With my disheveled hair and labored breathing, I implored, quickly, "Tell me, is there a hidden chamber within the estate? The emperor is about to raid, alleging that you harbor a dragon robe." They regarded me with astonishment, as though I were mad. I had no time to explain. I seized Li Changze by the collar, insisting, "There is less than half an hour left before the imperial decree arrives. If you do not believe me, send someone to the palace gate to investigate." My actions were indeed rash and presumptuous, but time was running out. The Duke of England, with a hint of suspicion, inquired, "How does the princess know this?" I forced myself to remain calm. "Do not concern yourself with how I know, just find it. The study, the hidden chamber, the secret compartments, leave no stone unturned. Is the princess not toying with us again?" The heir murmured softly. My previous reckless reputation had left an indelible mark on their minds. It was no wonder they assumed this was yet another of my caprices. Standing amidst them, I felt their doubtful gazes pierce through me. A haunting reminder of the lies I had spun, the chaos I had unleashed, and the people I had mocked in years past, all transforming into invisible shackles. I opened my mouth to defend myself. I was serious. I was not jesting. The Duke of England and the heir's eyes bore into me, as if attempting to see through my very soul. I was undeterred by their scrutiny, but was painfully aware of my tarnished credibility. Li Changze, growing impatient, grasped my wrist. "Enough. Do not act mad here." At that moment, a flustered servant rushed in. "My lord, it is dire news. We are surrounded by the imperial guards." My heart sank. It was too late. Seizing the opportunity while Li Changze was momentarily stunned, I broke free from his grip and sent the servant away. I struggled to stabilize my panic-stricken mind. Taking a deep breath, I spoke in a low voice, "Where is the hidden chamber?" Only then did Li Changyan react, hastily twisting the inkstone, revealing a small secret room behind the bookshelf. Inside lay an array of weapons collected by the Duke of England, yet there was no sign of the dragon robe. Directionless, I continued to divulge information. The Leaf family had grown too powerful. My father could no longer tolerate it. Today, he came to raid the Li household under the pretext of rebellion. Yet, he would never interrogate my father but would instead target my elder brother, ultimately compelling him to confess. Absurd. The Duke of England's eyes widened in fury, uncertain whether to direct his ire at me or my father. Li Changyan shook his head, his gaze resolute. "Impossible. I will not confess." I countered his resolve. "You must. It is imperative." The Duke of England had only 2 sons left, the frail elder, Li Changyan, and the younger, Li Changze. In the annals, the crown prince had once advised my father to show mercy, considering the duke's contributions, allowing him to confess and merely face exile instead of execution. The Duke of England was a loyal minister, a man of unwavering integrity, and had never entertained thoughts of rebellion. He could not admit to such slander. The torturers bypassed him, capturing the heir, Li Changyan, to extract a confession through coercion. Thus, the Li family confessed. No one knew how he had yielded. He was dead. They claimed he had taken his own life out of guilt. I continued to press on. "If you do not confess, you will die, and the confession of the Li family will still be stamped with your handprint. Your sister-in-law is with child, after your demise. She will be unable to bear the shock and will perish from blood loss. Confessing is merely temporary. Living offers a chance for redemption. I hastily concluded my plea and turned to the Duke. Father, do not sacrifice your children's lives for baseless accusations. Blind loyalty is not true loyalty. You have protected the realm. Now, for once, may I implore you to protect your wife and children? He had wielded a sword for a lifetime, weathered countless storms, and his hair had turned white. In his 50s, the once stalwart figure now stood weary and bent. Li Changze and his brother fell silent. They were not dullards and had already sensed the emperor's intentions. On the day the Duke returned to the capital, he had voluntarily surrendered his military insignia, rejecting all invitations from noble families, acting with utmost discretion. Yet, this upheaval arrived with shocking suddenness. The sound of an edict being proclaimed echoed from outside, and the expressions of the three men grew increasingly grave. I had laid all my cards on the table. The rest was now in their hands. I bowed in respect, perhaps for the first time in this body, as a younger generation. In this farewell, I hoped for my father and brother's safety, and longed for a day when we might meet again. The prince remained behind, and I asked my father to inform the inner chamber that the prince and the princess were quarreling in the study. I had stirred up chaos, and the location of the concealed dragon robe was indeed within the study. The emperor's men would surely focus their attention here. I could not afford to be suspected. Once everyone had departed, Li Changze fixed his piercing gaze upon me. How did you know? I wearily shook my head. It is a secret. There would be another fierce battle soon. I did not wish to discuss the supernatural. With time still before the edict was fully proclaimed, I sat across from him. Li Changze, do you harbor hatred for me? I do not hate you, but neither do I like you. That is well, not hating is sufficient. After a brief pause, I continued, my tone exceedingly neutral, yet my words laced with temptation. Then you should rebel. The emperor is merciless, and the Li family cannot escape the fate of total annihilation. It would be wiser for you to strike first and overthrow the Morong dynasty. His expression hardened, and he cast a cold glance at me, as if sizing up my intentions. Morong Wan, your surname is also Morong. I shrugged, indifferent. Considering your fate, do you truly believe mine could be any better? I would rather gamble that Li Changze would not pursue my utter destruction. He had once retrieved a corpse for me. Whether out of obligation to my past as a member of the Li family, or due to the consequences of my fate being tied to his, at least, he was not devoid of compassion. In the days to come, I would seek a quiet corner where I would not disturb him, living in peace. When the imperial guards burst in, I was in the midst of tugging at Li Changze's hair, shouting, "You wretched creature, you have bullied my small tortoise slave again. I shall have you castrated." The vice-captain of the imperial guards, witnessing the scene, awkwardly bowed. "Princess, I am here on the emperor's orders to conduct a search. I beg for your cooperation." I ceased my antics, feigning delight at this unexpected turn. I released Li Changze, pointing at him. "Search. Ensure you find evidence of his crimes, and have his head removed." Due to my interference, they failed to uncover any evidence in the study. Instead, they found it hidden within the Duchess of England's wardrobe, framing her on the spot. The entire household of the Duke of England was taken away. While there were ministers who pleaded on behalf of the Li family, they were powerless against the emperor's oppression. Firstly, when the ruler demands the death of his subjects, they must comply. Secondly, the Li family's prominence had made them a target. When the great tree falls, the smaller ones can finally thrive. Many awaited the opportunity to devour the Li family's resources. 10 days later, the Li family confessed again, and this time, Li Changyen survived. Within the imperial study, the atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. My father inquired what compensation I desired. Ignoring my wishes, he arranged a marriage for me, relegating me to a state of living widowhood. A classic case of delivering a blow followed by a sweet reward. I sat before the imperial desk, donning a cruel expression. "Father, I wish for Li Changze to die." The edict in my father's hand crashed onto the table with a loud thud, his brow furrowed in consternation. "Nonsense. I have already spared the lives of the Li family. How can I go back on my word?" I narrowed my eyes, baring my teeth. "Quietly, have him killed. I will not allow it." I easily reversed my stance, a twisted smile creeping upon my lips. "Very well then, father. In that case, I wish to sleep with Li Changze." My rapid shift in demeanor caught the emperor off guard. What on earth are you trying to achieve? One moment you want him dead. The next you wish to be with him. How shameless for a girl. Upon hearing this, I could not help but internally scoff. When have I ever been ashamed? Externally, however, my expression contorted severely. I, the unworthy daughter of the realm, cannot bring him to his demise, yet I shall instill in him a profound sense of revulsion. He has struck my cherished turtle servant and looks down upon me for nurturing such a creature, never allowing me near him. Defiantly, I shall oppose him. My father, the emperor, is troubled. Li Changze is imprisoned. How do you intend to exact your vengeance? For the sake of my ambitions, I am prepared to resort to any means necessary. Thus, I shall venture into the depths of the prison. Should this matter become public, it would tarnish the royal reputation. The emperor, disapproving, contemplates the scandal of a princess descending into the dungeons to bestow favor upon a prisoner, a travesty of propriety. I assure him, if you remain silent, father, then I too shall be discreet. None shall know. The emperor, seemingly resigned, gestures for me to proceed. Go, go, but do not create too much of a spectacle. The Li family has caused the emperor distress for many years. He would not let this opportunity slip by. For the sake of his own honor, he forbids any harsh treatment of the Li family, while harboring dark intentions, eager to witness me, his infamous daughter, shatter the Li family's unyielding resolve. The schemes lurking behind the word sleep are the true spectacle. In the annals of history, the emperor did not bask in his triumph for long. After reclaiming military power from the Duke of England, he reveled in his success, indulging in elixirs, only to succumb to sudden death. Subsequently, my twin brother ascended to the throne, and my mother became the Empress Dowager. These closest of kin, some even treacherous, have gradually pushed me into the abyss. In this lifetime, their fates shall certainly arrive much sooner. Within the dark, damp confines of the prison, a foul air pervades. At the innermost recesses, the cell door creaks open, and by the flickering candlelight, Li Changze sits upon a modest cot, clad in plain garments, his hair unbound. He possesses a formidable presence, his brow furrowed with an air of sternness that cannot be diminished by his incarceration. Our eyes meet. He is the man I yearn to possess, yet alas, fortune is not on our side. Ah, it is the princess, Li Changze states with a tone of indifference, though his demeanor remains composed. Wang Dequan stands by, flanked by two young eunuchs, their gazes sharp and watchful. With an air of arrogance, I stride forward, grasping his chin and teasingly caressing it. Li Changze, do you comprehend why I have come to ensure your cleanliness today? It is I, the princess, who has implored my father for a favor, to visit you. Pausing for effect, I lean closer, my lashes fluttering. Once I confirm he has received my signal, I shift to a provocative stance, gazing into his dark eyes and uttering two words, to toy with you. Li Changze abruptly rises, growling, "You dare." His towering figure looms over me, nearly causing me to lose my footing. I cautiously command the young eunuchs to bind his hands to the bars and gag him with cloth. Having gone days without food, Li Changze soon succumbs to humiliation, sprawled in a manner most undignified. Do not touch me. Go away. Play with your eunuchs. His words are muffled by the gag. The heavy breaths and throbbing veins betray his fury. I calmly inform him, I can transform you into the very eunuch you loathe. I brandish a dagger, lightly tapping it against his groin. In this moment, he is akin to a fowl upon the chopping block, at my mercy. Leave everything behind. Step outside, and keep your distance. Wang Dequan glances back multiple times. I ascend onto Li Changze's abdomen. He writhes in futile resistance, and I firmly grasp his garment, tearing it apart. Only when Wang Dequan's silhouette fades from view do I exhale in relief, easing my grip. In a moment of distraction, my waist slips dangerously, almost casting me off him. I admonish him, do not squirm like a maggot. He grits his teeth, get off. Enough with the theatrics, the others have departed. Li Changze's spirit seems to extinguish. I produce a meat bun from my bosom and bring it to his lips. Reflexively, he opens his mouth to take it. To keep the Li family subdued on their journey, I have hardly allowed them sustenance these past days, sapping their strength. I sit obediently upon him, retrieving another bun to place in his hands. I have brought you something. Tomorrow you shall be on the road. Father wishes to maintain appearances. allowing you to travel in a prisoner-esque carriage southward. Once he finishes the bun, I dig into my waist and offer him slices of beef. Dried meat, low in fat yet high in energy, is a must-have for prison visits. I speak the truth. As he eats, he watches in astonishment as I conjure from beneath my skirt a pair of cloth shoes, silver notes, undergarments, and candy. The shoes, deliberately worn, are caked in dust to avoid drawing attention. Each sole conceals 10 silver notes, 3 100 taels, 2 50 taels, 2 10 taels, and 3 1-tael notes. I have sewn them securely beneath the insoles, requiring considerable force to detach them. I eschew complicated mechanisms, opting instead for the simplest methods. The undergarments can be worn without removing trousers, threaded between the legs and secured at the waist. Li Changza, a pure-hearted young man, finds it difficult to discuss intimate garments. His expression darkens with embarrassment. Where did you learn such things? I dismiss his shame with a triumphant smile. It is simply the product of my not-so-bright mind. Inside, I have also sewn in silver notes, a few small coins, and a remedy for the common cold. I have even prepared candy, compact yet energy-rich. Conceal this bag of sweets within your trousers. After all, your modesty allows for discretion. When you find yourself in the lavatory unnoticed, simply retrieve one to eat. After imparting this advice, I slowly lift my gaze, only to find his lips pressed tightly together, as if he is struggling against some inner turmoil. His cheeks slightly puffed from the effort. Unbelievable, Li Changza huffs. You are hardly significant. I roll my eyes. Your life is at stake. Yet you concern yourself with such trivialities? I have adhered 20 small golden beans to his hairline, even affixing a few to his armpits, using a waterproof and preservative resin. I take great satisfaction in my handiwork, maximizing the limited space upon him. In countless dreams of evasion, I have pondered such schemes, and now I finally put them into practice. My only regret is that I cannot see my parents. This is all I can offer. This is already quite sufficient. Li Changza rasps. The silence in the air is unnaturally tense. I fear Wang Dequan may grow suspicious and come to investigate. I lower my voice, urging Li Changza. It is too quiet. Call out a few times. You strike me twice. If you do not, I cannot cry out. My lips twitch. The protagonist in the book is not one to seek punishment. I strike him, and he calls out, his cries devoid of genuine suffering. I must take my leave and rebind you. Li Changza does not hesitate, obediently extending his hands, resembling a vintage-filtered puppy, his appearance somewhat enticing. I take a deep breath, clearing my mind. The ropes coil tightly around his wrists as I bind him securely once more, stuffing his mouth to silence him. I cover his eyes with a handkerchief. Then, to my surprise, I clamber onto his waist. Didn't he see that coming, did you? I tease as I lean against him, my tone playful. Wang Dequan has a keen nose. He freezes, his breathing quickening. I shift against him, awaiting his complete surrender. With newfound freedom in his right hand, he tears away the blindfold, grasping my wrist and pulling me toward him. His alluring eyes glisten, a hint of crimson at their corners, his voice laced with desire. Why don't you come to me? I find myself enraptured, yet the moment he presses against me, I retreat to the floor, reclaiming my wrist. I stifle the heat in my cheeks, hastily burying myself in the corner. You come to me, I shall not. Behind me, Li Changza chuckles softly, initiating a series of subtle movements. The intricacies of our encounter are understood by those who comprehend. I can only press my hands against my ears in desperation. Li Changza gazes at me with an intensity that feels as though he would reduce me to ashes. I attempt to cover his eyes again, but my handkerchief is beyond salvage. I must leave now. I bound him tightly, strewing toys across the floor and splashing wine everywhere, leaving both Li Changza and his surroundings in utter disarray. After completing this act, I finally turned my gaze towards his face, which appeared strikingly pristine. With a demeanor that was both polite and composed, I sought his consent. Your neck is too clean. May I bite it a few times? As you wish, he replied, his Adam's apple rolling slightly, revealing no hint of resistance. I closed my eyes and lunged forward with fervor. The glaring red mark, encircled by faint bite impressions, suggested it must be painful. It stood out starkly against his fair skin, contrasting with the dark hue of the exposed flesh. I raised my hand to tousle my hair, letting strands fall freely. I murmured to myself, this should suffice. Li Chang's voice was resolute. Not enough, Morongwan. You are not like this. There hasn't been any blood.
What should I do then?
I have never harmed another. Taking up the wine jug, I gulped down a mouthful, the spicy flavor exploding in my mouth, emboldening me. I inscribed a character upon his chest. Li Chang's gripped my hand as we carved it together. He pressed down while I lifted up. Soon, the humiliating character for slave took shape. My trembling hand watched as blood quickly seeped from the skin, as if it were the seal I had placed. Li Changza remained indifferent, yet I was unsettled. Li Changza, rebel soon. Eradicate all those who have ever bullied you. My role was merely to kindle the flames of rebellion. How they spread was his responsibility as the male lead. I could divulge the fate of the Li family, for as a princess, I had my own means. But how he would rebel was beyond the comprehension of my character. My fervent enthusiasm was rejected by Li Changza. Does that include you? Of course not. It seemed, perhaps, I had gone too far. I was likely intoxicated, for how else could I utter? Why not let you retaliate? I shall not resist?
Li Changza.
Fearing my change of heart, swiftly agreed. Deal.
Oh.
It felt as though I had inadvertently sold myself. Driven by an inexplicable impulse, I bit down on his exposed collarbone. This was to be the final mark. Stepping out of the dim prison cell, the sunlight was so bright that I could barely open my eyes. With a look of satisfaction, I approached the palace eunuch to request the contraceptive soup. The eunuch was momentarily taken aback, but quickly donned his signature sycophantic smile. This old servant will attend to it immediately. Before long, he presented it before me, something that had clearly been prepared in advance. There was a distinct difference between what I had sought and what the emperor had commanded. The steaming contraceptive soup, with its unpleasant medicinal odor, assaulted my senses. I endured the discomfort and tilted my head back to swallow it down in one gulp, the bitter taste spreading immediately. I shivered as my stomach churned, almost regurgitating it. The first hurdle was passed. Li Changza was gone. That day, it had snowed again, and I did not see him off. This time, I hoped they would all endure and successfully reach the land of smoke and mist. The remainder of the journey was up to him. Meanwhile, I needed to resolve my own troubles. I must leave the capital. Soon, the weather began to warm and everything revived. It was again the season of mating for animals, and I dismissed my turtle servants. I immersed myself in the spring banquets and polo matches of the noble families in the capital. Ostensibly, I was seeking a suitor, but in truth, I was discreetly untangling the various relationships. Unfortunately, as spring passed, I had yet to determine a suitable candidate. The fragrant grass bid farewell to spring's countenance, and the green leaves welcomed the summer's brilliance. The Empress Dowager hosted a flower-viewing banquet and once more inquired whether I had found someone to my liking. I smiled and replied, indeed, someone exceptional. I was referring to Xue Lushu, the eldest son of the Minister of Personnel, a scholar of exceptional merit with a prestigious lineage, just returned from his post. However, the Empress Dowager was incensed. Xue Lushu was already married, with a son and a daughter. Had it been an ordinary girl, the Empress Dowager could have exerted pressure to dismiss her. Yet, that woman was the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister Fu Yueling. I became infatuated with Xue Lushu. I did not care. Mother, we agreed that I would choose this time. I wanted him, and if she did not acquiesce, I would become a nun, to pray for my grandmother. She had always doted on me, granting me whatever I desired while she was alive. The Empress Dowager, helpless, inquired further and learned that Xue Lushu and his wife shared a deep bond. I resigned myself to the notion that as long as they remained together, it was acceptable. The Empress Dowager attempted to reason with me, but I refused to listen. But Xue Lushu has a wife. I do not mind being a concubine. He and his wife are childhood sweethearts. I am not there to tear them apart. I wish to join them. They already have children. All the better. I need not bear any children myself, a painless path to motherhood. My resolve was unyielding, stirring up a storm throughout the city. The Prime Minister accused me, and the Emperor reprimanded me. In a fit of rage and humiliation, I abducted Xue Lushu under the cover of night. At dawn, I returned him, dirty and unconscious, to the minister's residence. Minister Xue was furious and joined the ranks of those who sought to denounce me. For several days, my scandal overshadowed state affairs in the court. Those officials whose sons and grandsons I had teased at the spring banquet did not spare me either, all coming out against me. I became the target of everyone's ire. Yet, I found it exhilarating. The emperor, unable to withstand the pressure, decreed my house arrest and ordered me to receive 20 lashes. I shouted that I would kill Shui's wife, and the empress dowager slapped me. The glass beads in my hair produced a crisp, sharp sound. The eunuchs and palace maids fell silent in fear, kneeling in a flurry. I covered my stinging cheek, my eyes wide in disbelief. In an instant, I trembled, lamenting, "Mother, you hit me. The emperor wants to hit me, and now you too. I never want to see you again. I shall go guard my grandmother's tablet." The empress dowager's once gentle visage twisted with rage, her entire body trembling slightly as she pointed towards the door, commanding sharply, "Go. Hurry and leave." "Very well. Very well." My heart soared with joy. She had finally acquiesced. I had long used this as leverage against her, and my repeated psychological insinuations had finally borne fruit. "Then I shall go," I shouted as I departed the capital. On my journey, I sped forth, fearful of any unforeseen obstacles. I raced towards the nunnery beside the National Protection Temple, leaving those unaware to think I was seeking rebirth. In truth, I was eager to shave my head and become a nun. As the cold blades skimmed my scalp, locks of hair floated down, and the weight on my heart finally lifted. The former luxuries, status, and identity would all be severed with those strands of hair. This was the path I had chosen for myself. A completely shaved head was better than merely a cropped one. The next day, my royal brother stormed into the nunnery with several guards. The heavy, intricately carved door creaked open, sounding like it had shattered some long-held taboo. In an instant, the once murmuring nunnery fell silent, as if gripped by an invisible hand around its throat. My heart raced uncontrollably. I was indeed fearful of this royal brother. After years of wielding power, he was no longer the brother who had doted on me. The affairs of the Duke of England were his doing, orchestrated to eliminate useless ministers before ascending to power. Over the past 6 months, I had done my utmost to avoid contact with him. I never expected that it would be he who came to retrieve me, capable of forcibly dragging me back to the palace. I discreetly clenched my palm, now damp with sweat, suppressing my deep-seated dread. I approached him with a calm demeanor. Only I could protect myself. My royal brother and his entourage thought I was throwing a childish tantrum, but little did they know I was dead serious. His face darkened. Which fool dares to shave the princess's head? The pressure from the higher-ups was something the young nun could not withstand, causing her to tremble. The abbess stepped forward. It was I, indeed. I interrupted her. Amitba. It was this nun who chose to cut her hair. I cannot implicate the innocent monastics due to my actions. My royal brother reproaches me for my capriciousness, disregarding the dignity of the imperial family. Yet I stand firm, armed with reason, esteemed benefactor. The Empress Dowager herself granted me permission to renounce worldly ties and dedicate my life to praying for the late Empress Dowager. The attendants within the Queen's palace can vouch for my claims. I turn and kneel before the Buddha, solemnly declaring, I am fully aware of my past follies, and I wish to spend the remainder of my life praying for the Empress Dowager as an act of filial piety and atonement. Fortunately, he seems disinclined to pursue the matter further, perhaps believing I would retreat in shame. After a moment of silence, my brother merely utters, Morong Wan, take care of yourself. Before turning away, I whisper to myself, I am known as Wukong, the humble nun. Raising my gaze to the Buddha, I smile mischievously. Subsequently, it became widely known that I had embraced monastic life. Henceforth, there was no longer a Princess Jingwan. Only the little nun Wukong remained. For an extended period, every conversation and action felt like walking a tightrope, fraught with the fear of missteps. However, in this moment, I finally cast off the weighty shackles, free to be a joyful little nun. News of Li Chongzhe's rebellion spread across the Great Xia, occurring slightly ahead of the timeline depicted in the texts. As if making way for him, Father Emperor also passed away earlier than expected. I refused to descend the mountain, citing my monastic vows. If I were to sever ties, I would do so completely, leaving no handle for anyone to grasp. My brother ascended the throne amidst turmoil. With the military talisman of the Li clan in his possession, he grew overly confident. While Father Emperor was alive, he relied on disguise, supported by the Chancellor Fu. Now, without the pressure of a higher authority, he indulged in excess. Chancellor Fu wielded immense power in the court, presiding over a corrupt administration where military generals fell from grace and reinforcements failed to arrive. The court's ineptitude led to successive defeats. Later, Chancellor Fu proposed a marriage alliance with the Turks to flank Li Changze from both sides. He had not forgotten my undermining of his daughter's prospects and set his sights on me. My brother forcibly brought me back to the palace. Having endured little hardship at the nunnery, I had maintained my health and vitality. It could be said that with a change of splendid attire and a bit of grooming, the former princess's grace would instantly resurface. Yet, my shorn head posed a considerable dilemma. How could one adorn a crown of white hair without a single strand of black silk? Standing there, uttering a single amitba, would surely infuriate everyone. It felt less like a marriage alliance and more like a declaration of animosity. Clad in my robe and with a naive smile, I greeted him, esteemed benefactor. I hope you are well. My brother seethed with indignation, yet found himself powerless against me. Thus, I cheerfully returned to my nunnery, all for this day. I had been the most diligent nun in the temple, shaving my head with such precision that not a trace remained, smooth as polished jade. I prayed fervently for Li Changze's swift victory, hoping for the nation to find its rightful path once more. Surely, it was this sincerity that moved the Buddha. Li Changze's forces surged forth like an unstoppable tide, while the court suffered defeat after defeat. With the narrative unfolding in my favor, I had an undeniable influence on the events at play. This time, my brother was unable to establish contact with the Turks. It was Xue Lushu who intervened. By now, he had risen to the position of Deputy Minister of Justice. Ostensibly the son-in-law of Chancellor Fu, he covertly supported Li Changze. It was he who orchestrated the interception of the bridal procession. In the story, he remained steadfast, fully aware that the Murong royal family was beyond salvation. Yet he continued to struggle for the restoration of the rightful order. Even though he considered Li Changze a close friend, he did not offer his support until later. When he had completely lost hope, he quietly cleared numerous obstacles from Li Changze's path. On the night of the abduction, I conversed with him for an entire night, discussing the grand affairs of the world, the sufferings of the common people, and the rise and fall of dynasties. All the historical knowledge I had retained from my school days was drawn forth. As a princess, I held no hope for the Murong royal family. Perhaps his unwavering loyalty was misguided, leading him early on to Li Changze's camp. Outside, the flames of war raged and the winds of bloodshed howled. The clang of weapons did not disturb the tranquility of my life. I cared not for the fate of my brother and mother, yet I did not wish to bear witness to their demise. The nunnery where I resided felt like a secluded sanctuary, perhaps blessed by the royal name, or perhaps guarded by unseen deities, for no one came to disturb my peace. One day, as I sat in meditation with my back to the sunlight, the warm rays lulled me into a drowsy state. I inadvertently leaned into a large hand, my half-formed face resting in that palm as if seeking the most fitting solace. In moments of foggy clarity, I heard a voice, laced with mirth. Is the princess not afraid of the Buddha's reproach for such insincerity? The tone carried a playful warmth, penetrating my muddled consciousness. It sounded familiar. My heart began to race, an inexplicable tension and anticipation flooding over me. Upon opening my eyes, I was met with a towering shadow, enveloping my figure entirely. At 20 years old, Li Changze could have easily been toppled by me. At 24, his very shadow could consume me. Sunlight streamed through the nunnery's windows, casting mottled patterns on the ground. In the serene atmosphere, his voice drifted softly. Does the princess still drool in her sleep? His words held a teasing familiarity, bridging the gap of countless days apart. I was momentarily dazed, my mind struggling to comprehend. He seemed to find my bewilderment amusing, drawing back his hand to lightly flick my bald head.
Ouch!
Though the gesture was gentle, it jolted me awake, igniting a mix of embarrassment and irritation. Instinctively, I covered my face, attempting to shield myself from this unexpected encounter. Esteemed benefactor, you must be mistaken. There is no princess here. Yet Li Changze chuckled, utterly assured, even if you were turned to ash, I would still recognize you. With that, he effortlessly slipped beneath my arm, lifting my seated form with ease. My legs, still poised in a lotus position, remained upright as he carried me into the bedroom, navigating the nunnery with an undeniable familiarity. He set me down behind a small couch and knelt on one knee, resembling a devoted supplicant. He did not seem like a man seeking vengeance or offering gratitude. Rather, he appeared to be there to collect a debt, bearing an air of insouciance. After 4 years of fasting and chanting, I had hoped for a mind untainted by worldly desires. Yet upon seeing him, I realized my mortal heart still lingered. Before me stood a man darker than I remembered, his stature more robust, exuding an air of steadiness and gallantry. His countenance had grown even more captivating, drawing my gaze irresistibly. It seemed to possess an intangible allure that stirred my heart's desires. A small voice within me cried out, "Too close." His scent enveloped me, not unpleasant, nor particularly fragrant, just a searing warmth. In my flustered state, I raised my hands instinctively, invoking Amitabha in a desperate attempt to mask my inner turmoil. He seized my hands, refusing to let go. "Does the princess still recall the debt you owe me?" In the prison, as I prepared to leave, I had brushed against his bound hands, which he had clasped tightly. He had said, "We will meet again. I will come to collect." Yet I had intended to default on that debt. Esteemed benefactor, those are bygone matters. I have long forgotten. Has the princess truly become addicted to her monastic life?
I retorted, I am.
I attempted to withdraw my hands, but he held on tenaciously. "Very well, little master Wukong. Do you have any plans to return to the secular world?" I instinctively shook my empty head, avoiding his burning gaze. "Esteemed benefactor, this temple is home to nuns. You are a man and should not be here," he insisted, "but you are my wife. I must bring my wife back to the secular world." I countered, "You are already divorced. The past is behind us. We should have no further entanglements. Your name still appears in the Li family genealogy." He remained obstinate, squatting there like an immovable mountain, determined not to relent until he achieved his goal. The connections between individuals can be extraordinarily enigmatic. Some people may coexist for a lifetime without ever igniting a spark, while others can forge an everlasting bond with just a single glance. In those fleeting moments of contact, as I departed with the intoxication still swirling within me, an inexplicable sense of bittersweet farewell washed over me, akin to that of parting with a beloved. Thus, I bid him, a gesture born from a desire to release the tangled emotions that entwined my heart. It was as if I sought to etch my unique mark upon him through this act. Had anyone asked me then if I believed in love at first sight, my answer would have undoubtedly been a resounding yes. Yet, for years, neither long nor short, have elapsed, rendering the tumult of those bygone days increasingly distant, fading into the mists of memory. For me, it has become nothing more than a hazy recollection of a past life, gradually dispersed by the winds of time.
Now,
amidst the tranquility of this nunnery, I find solace in the company of flickering lamps and ancient Buddhas, listening to the rhythmic chimes of morning and evening bells. Here, devoid of scheming and the complexities of human relations, I merely tend to my own small sanctuary, eating, sleeping, and nurturing my spirit. Thus, do not think to entice me with beauty. I have chosen to close my eyes. However, the gaze of others possesses a penetrating quality. Even if unseen, I can still feel it upon me. His intense gaze burns like a fierce flame, threatening to consume me whole. It seems that the coal delivered amidst the snow was not in vain, as it has effectively ignited his passion. In a moment of bewilderment, my stomach audibly protested, its rumbling starkly interrupting the silence that enveloped us. Li Changza smiled, his eyes twinkling with mirth. "Let us go, and have our meal." His words filled me with embarrassment, making me feel as though I had lost this standoff. My legs had long since fallen asleep, having remained crossed throughout our encounter, entirely due to their numbness. He wasted no time in gently uncrossing my legs and began to massage them. The pressure was just right, gradually alleviating the discomfort. I stared at him, lost in a haze of mixed emotions, momentarily forgetting to halt his ministrations. From that day forth, Li Changza became a fixture in the nunnery, disregarding the kingdom he had once fought for, insisting on entangling himself in matters of the heart within these walls. Fortunately, he did not disturb the tranquility of the other nuns, fixating solely on me. Consequently, I was compelled to relocate to the farthest corner of the nunnery. separated from the other nuns. Li Changza forbade them from shaving my head. Within days, my hair began to sprout in unruly tufts. While I meditated, he would wrap his arms around me, affectionately ruffling my hair. I was powerless to resist, silently reciting, "A monk does not strike a madman." The following day, I sought refuge in a corner. Li Changza, noticing, was amused and squatted before me, playfully kneading my cheeks. To fulfill my duty as a respectable nun, I diligently completed the tasks assigned to me by the abbess, sweeping the courtyard. In the early morning, when the sunlight still held a hint of mist, I would gently clear the fallen leaves and debris from the ground. Yet, like an ever-present shadow, Li Changza reappeared, sweeping away the very leaves I had painstakingly gathered with a mere lift of his leg. Childish. Though I felt a tinge of exasperation, I was not truly angered. Calmly, I picked up the broom for a second round, considering it a test of my patience. I would let him cause his mischief. Days turned into weeks, and my routine became monotonous. Eating, working, meditating, and sleeping. Li Changza began to believe that my reluctance to leave with him stemmed from the comfort of my new life. In a fit of determination, he pressured the abbess to assign me the task of fetching water. He stood by, arms crossed, confident that my slender limbs would be incapable of carrying the heavy buckets. How dare he underestimate me? I resolved to prove him wrong. I hoisted a wooden bucket and staggered my way to the river, only to realize that I could barely lift it once filled. The bucket itself was heavy, and adding water made it nearly impossible to manage. I could only transport it one ladle at a time, which would surely leave the other nuns parched. With a huff, I discarded the ladle and pointed at him. "You, come carry the water." Li Changza ambled over, a mischievous grin upon his face. "The benefactor Li Changza will not assist you. However, the husband Li Changza is willing to help. Which do you prefer?" He was clearly teasing me, angered by his words. I glared at him and raised my voice. "Will you help or not?" Li Changza burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the valley. He effortlessly scooped up the bucket and made his way back to the nunnery. As I walked ahead, I casually remarked, "You know I am not your wife." He quickened his pace, grasping my hand with a light-hearted tone. "No matter who you are, I will marry you. You are my wife." It seemed he understood. We returned to the palace, where the Li family, aside from my sister-in-law's unborn child, remained intact. Though Li Changyan could not fight on the battlefield, his intellect rivaled that of 1,000 soldiers. Now, having achieved his ambitions, he withdrew with his sister-in-law to live in seclusion. Li father and Li mother, weary of deceit and treachery, relinquished the throne to Li Changza. Historically, the transition of power is often accompanied by verbal disputes. Li Changza, however, cast aside these burdens, leaving the mess to Xue Lushu while he retreated to the nunnery for peace. Xue Lushu, with her sharp tongue, finally secured a date for the new emperor's coronation. Upon ascending the throne, Li Changza intended to make me empress, causing an uproar both within and beyond the court. How could a deposed princess, one with a tarnished reputation, be crowned empress? Li Changza began to spin tales. He proclaimed to the world that the Murong royal family, filled with guilt over their usurpation, had all committed suicide in shame. As for me, I was Ning Anil, a nun since childhood, endowed with virtue. If I were to become empress, I would surely safeguard the realm and ensure its prosperity. All dissent and skepticism were ultimately quelled by Li Changza's subsequent diligent governance. Before the coronation, Li Changza granted me a grand wedding. That night, within the flickering candlelight, an atmosphere of intimacy and tranquility enveloped us. I reached out first, tugging at his garments, my heart aching for the servant before me. But in an instant, he transformed into a mischievous creature. No more buns were needed. He was quite the glutton. "Someone bring me this rascally little prince." Epilogue. When I returned with him, it was not the weight of the water that defeated me, but rather the sight of the gently flowing river, which unraveled the tangled mess within my heart. Perhaps remaining in the nunnery would indeed allow me to live a straightforward life. Yet it seemed that apart from eating and sleeping, there would be little else to stir my soul. The nuns around me possessed unwavering faith, reciting scriptures and performing their duties with joy. Their fervor anchored them, providing both solace and purpose. As for me, lacking faith, I felt like a drifting reed, aimlessly wandering through life, unable to find a place truly my own. During my time with him, I had to admit that my heart had been stirred anew. He was so strikingly handsome. In modern terms, he would be considered a top-tier celebrity. What was happening to my infatuated mind? Love is inherently a gamble, with no one knowing the outcome. But what if fortune smiled upon me? I resolved not to bind my future with too many constraints. As for my future with him, we would take it one step at a time. Most importantly, in an age where women were often powerless, I found myself without support. The world is vast, and I long to explore it. He must serve as my guide.
The end.
Thank you for listening, and until we meet again in the next tale.